Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. My name is Monty Hook and I am your host. And today I'm joined by the one and only Rhyn Nasser. Rhyn is in North Queensland in Australia. How is it down there in Australia right now?
It's beautiful, mate. Queensland, Ravenshoe, so highest town in Queensland. And yeah, this is the homeland. So it's been beautiful. Been in the rainforest this morning. And yeah, so super grateful to be here in these times.
Cool, man. So, look, I wanted to bring you on to the show because you and I have a long history together, and just to give people a little bit of context to understand that, we met, close to 20 years ago now when you were 18 years old. We were living very different lives back then. This was in bars, and, we were playing around, getting up to mischief, and I think the thing that we talk about quite often is just how different our lives have become. You've taken an interesting journey since I met you back in the day. You always had that interest, I guess, of martial arts, but you went and spent a significant amount of time in China, actually going and living with monks over there and really training under them, understanding the full disciplines of how these people live, and integrating yourself into those cultures and those worlds. I guess with some view to embrace your calling, which is to take some of that wisdom and embed that back into Western society, I guess, and to introduce that to entrepreneurs, which is the space that you mostly work in now, and we can kind of go there. But yeah, give us a brief kind of snapshot, I guess, into the let's not go into the stories of what we used to get up to, but share a little bit about your journey in terms of what led you to China, martial arts. What are you studying now? You're an expert in qigong and these different types of energy work, etc. And what's really fascinating about 2020, I think, is just how magnified and highlighted the need for us as humanity to connect back to nature is. It's really potent now, that thought, that we need to bring ourselves back to nature. And I think a lot of people like you and I, who are already kind of already had these practices. It's just becoming stronger and stronger. But I think it's been introduced to a lot of people who are maybe sitting on the fence, or they were just too busy and distracted. So I actually feel like it's a beautiful time. So yeah, share a little bit about that background and how that's led you to what it is you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you, Monty, for having me today. It's a pleasure and great to see you. Yeah, I grew up in far north Queensland, so a town called Ravenshoe. It's a small sort of country town, and I grew up in a pub. My dad had a hotel, so and my mum had a travel agency. They sort of separated early just due to their business. It's probably a polite way of saying it, maybe, but they've always been sort of good friends since. And I think it's the same as anyone's journey. Our personality gets conditioned based on our parents, environment, feedback, any type of conditioning. And, so for me, the main note that my personality got was like, go out, find a career, be successful, get the car, have the beautiful girlfriend, and it was probably lucky that it wasn't that ambitious of a dream. And, at the age of 21, like I achieved all those things and realized like, oh, I'm not really happy. And I thought when I got here, that was it. That was the crust of the personality. First realizing that it got to the top of that mountain and realizing, well, hang on a minute. Like I thought this was the goal. And I think everyone can relate to that kind of first quest in life, that our personality seeks something, and it's usually something outside of ourselves, some sort of power, whether it's a business or a car or a dream or something like that. And lucky enough, I'd met like a Kung Fu master, and I started to develop my Qigong. I was a couple of years into that, or at least a good year into that. And my inner world was awakening to a different possibility, a different calling, which is very different to the conditioning of the personality and how our cognitive and emotional body wraps itself around an ideology of something that's being sold to us that we feel if we get there, we're going to be enough or whatever. So I just Qigong enabled me like a pathway or a gateway to go in and ask deeper questions and commune with the Tao or the universe or God or whatever the language may be, source or whatever. And I just asked myself, if I continue running bars and nightclubs and building a property portfolio, will I be happy? And it was like and it was like a no. And then I said, well, cool. If I don't go to China, which was to go study with the monks, that was actually the real question. I was like, cool. If I let this go and continue to develop the what my personality kind of wanted, would I regret it? And it was like, yeah, you're going to regret it. And it was a really clear answer. So it took me about 7 months to get my shit together, to go overseas and live with the monks, and I kind of dedicated my life full time to that. I ended up selling my house that I built up and just really started to discover myself. And I think the key thing that a lot of people struggle with in society is we are from the land, we are from the country, and our civilization is so much stronger than our nature. And so to really reconnect with that and to connect with the source, we need to realize that civilization, there's some extremely beautiful things in civilization. I really believe in evolution and progressive culture, but there's also this part of slavery and indoctrination that comes in there, and it only takes a couple of generations to form a couple of bad habits. It's like, take organic food for example. Today, people are like, oh, you eat organic food. It's like, well, what do you think your grandparents ate? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they were eating. And
but they didn't call it organic food. They just called it food.
It was just food, yeah. And so a couple of generations that maybe missed the education, and then all of a sudden we're indoctrinated into a different myth or a culture, whether it's in most cultures these days, and particularly in Western society, because we've taken out of the sacredness out of the way that we live, we just take everything for granted and we don't really question anything. And I think what you learn from going and living with monks and masters is ceremonial ritual, which in other words is another way of saying, how do you embody a more of a conscious way of living? And when you bring that consciousness to the way that we live, we get to question what's really beyond. And one of the things I learned from Buddhism, because I was in China, the main three arts was like Daoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, which were kind of like, that's a part of the culture. And the Buddha always goes, well, if something occurs, good or bad, go back 3 things and find out what the root is, or go back until you find what has generated that possibility. And when we really look at that, we stop looking at the effect of things, and we can really start to relate to the cause of things, and we can start to shift our life and not get caught up in our personality chasing, the personality dream, which is kind of a part of initiation. It's almost like, Jim Carrey has that quote, I hope everyone gets rich and famous just so they realize that that's not the thing. In other words, it's like, I hope everyone gets what they think that they want from their personality, just to realize it's far more deeper than that. And that was kind of like the carrot leading you to the soul.
So here's a question. I mean, not everybody feels called like you were to, go and spend time with monks in China. And, I'm kind of with you. All the work that I've done in ceremony and everything has led me to a place where I can really appreciate, just really have gratitude and appreciation for the small things, right? And then that is one of the things that has kind of led me to have this practice of presence, which then has a flow-on effect to everything in my life, the way that I show up, the way that I operate, how my leadership, my relationships, all of that. But in the language that you're using, you're talking about you going and throwing yourself, into, working with monks, and you're talking about consciousness, etc. I mean, that's kind of a big kind of leap for people, for the average. I mean, you and I probably share pretty similar audience and kind of who we're talking to us, but, it's still a barrier for people, it's still a big kind of leap for people to go, okay, well, I'm just a regular entrepreneur, I'm just a regular person, and then this whole conversation around spirituality and consciousness seems like a massive leap, right? So yeah. What are some of the things that you've kind of learned in China, which I guess you now teach, or what are the small things that people can easily kind of embrace, or that are easily understood or tangible, that they can put in their lives right now without having to have this overwhelming thought about consciousness and you know, the really deep, big picture stuff. Because I think for me, it's understanding the depth of what's possible has come through just in kind of baby steps. You know, like I've always, since I've young, I've had a lot of experiences in my life on the spiritual side. So I was always a bit of a weirdo in that sense. But I also lost my way. I also got really wrapped up in entrepreneurship, and I've got to be successful. I've got to make my money. There was always this underlying kind of thing there. And like you, I never felt kind of fulfilled in that. There was something just always kind of eating away on the inside. But I was lucky. I kind of already had those roots of having experienced spiritual things as a young person. A lot of people don't have that. So where do people kind of start without it being overwhelming?
Yeah, great question. It's good to bring it back to the core of things too. So thank you. The first piece that I would recommend is it's really the reconnect to the breath. Like, and that sounds, that could be easily written off, you know, like, oh, just connect to the breath. Like I breathe every day. Like what are you talking about? But most people in modern society, they only use about 70% of their lung capacity, if that. So, and you know, the lungs linked up to the digestive system as well. Those two organs is what excretes most of our food and basically like it's our life force, you know.
And the hormones that make us feel good come from there.
Yeah. So we are what we eat, and we are what we don't excrete, you know. So we actually eat in a way what we breathe, you know, and so that circulates through our body. And so that's if you look at Chinese medicine, the lung and large intestine are both in the middle element. And so that reconnection to breath, okay, is good for the physical body, good for the health. And there's so much evidence around how, you know, people can go down the rabbit hole just with breath and find out what's possible there. But it's really the gateway to the soul or the gateway to the spirit. And the fundamental understanding is that it's for people to understand is, okay, the more that we can connect and move from a state experience to more of a stage experience of riding the current of our breath or riding the current of our soul or spirit, the deeper we'll start to awaken to what is, and we'll actually get a deeper view of who we actually are, which is that personality structure, which is, you know, from 0 to 7, unconsciously, we've built a lot of conditioning. We don't build our adult consciousness to about age 7. So a lot of what happens to us emotionally gets anchored. And then as we age, the stories start to unfold, which are linked back to 0 or 7. So the breath is the first way of experiencing some sort of freedom from our conditioning. And, you know, basically what, like probably more of a Taoist perspective is develop more of a balance with the breathing. So to give the audience something, it's 4.5 seconds in, 4.5 seconds out. And you breathe in through the nose, then out through the mouth. And you take about 3 of those with the intention to clear any anxiety, any doubt, any worry. And then once the body feels harmonized, you go into the second stage, which is only in through the nose and out through the nose. And it's 4.5 seconds in, 4.5 seconds out. Now why 4.5 seconds? And because it equals 9. And 9 is the symbol of the universe. You know, Tesla says if you want to know the universe, study the number 9. But it also is the balance point between yin and yang. So even spirituality's become materialized now, and you know, lots of kids. So a lot of it is about what am I wearing and have I got the, you know, rather than what's going on the inside. So proper breath is to restore, to get us very close to yin and very close to our Tao. And what I mean by Tao is our source nature. So who we were when we were born, before all the labels and conditioning came on. So returning back to that breath is important. So the second stage is in through the nose, out through the nose for 4.5 seconds with a loving, nurturing intention on the physical body, for the whole physical body. So really just to drop in and love the flesh, love the form, love what we're in. And it's just a loving intention. Then to make it simple, there's one other piece that you do with the pineal gland, which you kind of open it up and you connect to nature. And then you draw the chi in from the pineal gland and you store it down into the lower dantian. So then the third section is you focus on the heart. So, and you continue the breathing in through the nose, out through the nose. You only go out of the mouth when you feel like a bit of chi comes up or the field wants to recalibrate. Out through the mouth. It helps to recalibrate the breath back to 0 point. So Then we focus on the heart. See, the heart is basically clouds a lot of our emotional body. So what we are seeing in the world isn't as clearly as it's not. It's still very personality based. So we want to, what the Taoists call, is polish the heart or nurture the heart back to its childlike state. So because we've got 3 rings to the heart. The very center ring is the source ring. It's the monad, the spirit. The next ring is our transpersonal ring, our tribe, our soul family, the people that we love. The third ring is our personality ring, which is like, these are my clothes, you know, maybe you are my friend, this is what I do for a job, this is what, and so basically everyone gets caught up on the outer ring and they think that's who they are. So then they protect that ring fiercely. This is my stuff. They get into survival about, this is who I am. No, that's your stuff. And so the encouragement is, the more that we can deepen the breath and polish the heart, we can come to the core monadic nature of who we are. And that's that universal galactic chi that pours out through the center into our soul, and then from our soul into our personality. And that gives us a greater perspective of what true love is. Most of the love that people are chasing is from the personality ring. And once you taste soul love, and once you taste universal love, it's like, holy crap, it just puts everything in perspective. And all of a sudden it's like, it doesn't matter if I change my mind or I fail or I shift my path. And fundamentally, what's more important at the core of my heart? And can I meet my lover or my friends or my family from that core? And of course, we're always going to get drawn back into the personality, because most of the world is in that personality ring. So the encouragement is to go deeper. So the heart is also related to concentration. So basically, when we break our heart, which is the third ring usually, people are like, whoa, it's like all of a sudden we're swimming in a sea of unknown. And spiritual practice is to really, and physical practice, because spirituality is as much about the physical as it is the spirit, how to integrate those two so we can experience a deeper love beyond that third ring. And yeah, so as the heart gets polished and the breathing becomes still, notice that this is a very gentle, it's not like a yang style breath where you go, because most people are already in a lot of shock and we need to undo all of it. So the 4th stage is you go to the dantian now. You go from the heart, now you go to the dantian, so the womb area. And you have a nourishing, loving energy for the lower dantian. And you, again, breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the nose for 4.5 seconds. And you harmonize the energy in the dantian. You spend about maybe 2 minutes at each stage, and you can go longer. Then the 5th stage is returning to childlike breath. Now it's different. Some people think childlike breath is just breathing into the belly and breathing out. But when you return to childlike breath, essentially we're trying to get, so yin generates yang, but what generates yin is the emptiness. So we're trying to return to before stress and culture and everything, was bombarded, and our lung capacity started to shrink and our breath started to shorten. Then our anxiety starts to kick off. Anxiety fires our personality and our thoughts, and already we're already off center, So and then people try to manage that problem from the outside rather than going back within. So on the 5th stage, returning to childlike breath, this whole breathing in for 4.5 seconds in, 4.5 seconds out is to recalibrate the breath to its natural state, how we're breathing as a baby naturally breathes. And this is the 1st stage of longevity practice. So once that breath, so it's like you're tuning a guitar. Think of like modern day breathing as a guitar you pick up and it's like, oh, wow. But once that breath is restored, it actually starts to breathe again on its own and generate its own energy. It actually, so what it feels like is you're no longer breathing in through your nose or in through your mouth. It feels like at the center of the dantian, you just going, like it just has its own mouth and it's breathed in life force. So the dantian is known as the ocean of chi. It just produces infinite amount of energy. It's a magical, it's different to the sacral chakra, but it's linked in.
So it's an energetic area. It's not a, it's like a specific thing. It's a energetic area.
Yeah, an energetic area.
In the same way that a chakra might be as well.
Yeah. And so each chakra and even the cell of our body, we can go into the source of the Tao and activate it and vibrate it through our flesh. But the dantian is known as this big source of it's the ocean of chi. So it just And so this breathing practice, when we can decondition ourselves, uncivilize our process of breath, which is very anxiety based and very fear driven, into breathing more 4.5 seconds in, 4.5 seconds out. So one, you're going to balance yin and yang. So you'll find the middle point. So the breath, without breath, we die. So if we can find the middle point of our breath, our whole diet, our whole way of life starts to balance. And it's not like, oh, I read a book and it told me to do this. My body is like, oh, I need to eat meat today, or I need to eat vegetables today, or it's no meat today, or you know what I mean? Like, because you've got Taoists that will eat meat, eat some, let's not get in that conversation, but your animal body starts to tune more with your spirit and your soul, which starts to tune into what your actual balance may be and what the medicine is, which is, we're far more intelligent than a book. Not to say that a book doesn't amplify our ability, but if we're reading the words and believing it, it's a cognitive belief. It's not like an actual deep knowing based on our own understanding.
Yeah, that's cool. So where do you? I mean, I get this, not to the depth that you get it, of course, and it's actually a very common conversation in my life these days, the breathing. And how do you think it is that humanity went wrong? Like, why are we so disconnected from these kinds of teachings? Because I am 100%, I feel like my mission, at this time of my life, is to help bring some of these messages to the mainstream, right? There seems to be this massive separation where it's like this kind of stuff that you're talking about is almost like weird, It's like, well, what's this weirdo hippie talking about? I know we're getting better, right? I know we're getting better, and it's getting more integrated over time, and we've got a long way to go. But like, how did we go so wrong? Is it, obviously with the introduction of, the industrial age, and we all became conforming to get jobs, and we kind of separated from the lands, and we built cities and all this kind of stuff, and technology became a thing. But how is it that we got so disconnected, and how can humanity connect back to that? Because my thought is, we've only got one way forward as humanity, not even to thrive, but to survive. But I'm very optimistic about the future if we can connect back to what's important, which is nature and spirit. So how do we do that as a collective?
Yeah, I think the key, it's a deep question, and it's a beautiful question, and it's one, like, if the audience can just reflect on that, that's the beginning. But if you look at history, we've been indoctrinated through like slavery, even though we think we've been sold freedom. Like, a lot of our freedoms have been taken from us. It comes down to unhealthy use of power and control. On a bigger scale, though, I believe in the sacred balance, and every act that's happened is part of the sacred balance unfolding the way that it needs to. Is
that so us as individuals can learn our own lessons? Like, if everything was just utopia, there's nothing for us. There's nothing for us to learn. Like, do we have to kind of have that? If I have these deep thoughts all the time. Obviously, every generation has had their own version. In 2020, we've got a very magnified version of lots of things going on, but we think that's unique to us. But every generation for the history of time has had their own version of whatever spiritual crisis that they've got to go through. And as you said, it's is that the great cosmic joke to for us to keep ourselves in check, where we've got to do that work for ourselves.
Yeah, well, I think what's unique about this time is globally we're all experiencing, at least I think it's the first time that I know in like the whole of history as we know it, that globally we're experiencing a crisis. So that's kind of cool because moving our consciousness from just I'm looking after me to I'm looking after my family to I'm looking after my community to world or global consciousness is a really good thing. So collectively we're experiencing the effects of what this opportunity and also crisis, because it's the same thing, and so and it's important to hold that balance point, I find, but it's it's important that some people be, this is a crisis and I'll stand for this. Some people will be on the opportunity side. That's totally fine. The good thing about now is that we're collectively experiencing that as humanity. So that's going to be a huge effect for global consciousness in some shape or form. So going back to what you were saying, mainly civilization, we're so industrial revolution, or when science broke away from astrology, which was a good thing, we lost connection with land and nature. And so evolution is great, but now you have like disembodied scientists who look through the lens of one view. And so the way I like to look at it, like in Chinese medicine, you've got this concept Jing, Qi, Shen, which are the three treasures. And inside of Shen, you've got 5 different types of Shen. So the way I look at it as a scientist is they're studying one of the types of consciousness, and they're having a battle over it, which is because even the battle is good. It provides more possibility and understanding when people go toe to toe. So with different thoughts. But if we lose our connection to nature, which modern society does, then when it's going to be harder to maintain the sacred balance that is something that we've lost within, which is something that we need to, going back to the breath and then just looking at history and trying to reestablish our roots in the earth, as well as still being able to evolve consciousness. So hopefully that answered some of the question. I feel like I missed a piece there, Monty.
No, it's good. The question, the answer, the conversation goes where it wants to go. So tell us a little bit more about what you did in China. I'm really curious. One of the things I'm super curious about is how do people go from living one kind of life to then going and throwing themselves deep into the jungle or into monkhood, or because it's almost a mind-blowing thought to change your life so dramatically or so drastically. So what was that experience like for you, living with them, experiencing the kind of discipline that they have, and what were some of those things that you took away, which you've now been able to really carry through your life, that has really sort of supported you?
A few little questions in there, so I'm thinking which is the best way to answer. So first of all, one realization is when you arrive at a place, environment can really support the unfolding of who we become. But there were still people who were next to me who just didn't choose to make the most of the opportunity, So it's not like the grass is greener on the other side. It's kind of like, where do you water it, and where do you want to go? But in terms of what enabled me to make that decision, is I feel like it was because of the Qigong practice, which developed more intuition, and it was following my intuition, not what society said. Like, what's my deep truth and where do I want to go? And innately inside of that, I realized that my soul had something to share with the world, and that I needed to initiate myself. I needed to, okay, look, there's something natural inside of your soul that wants to share something. There's more development that I needed to go through to even understand what that was. And I feel like that's a constant process as well. So that's kind of like what, kicked me off on that journey. And then just, regular practice of mind, body, and spirit was, and in nature, was in eating foods that were eating foods that were seasonal and local was great, and that just develops a constitution that allows us to really discover. See, it's not something so much in the mind after a while. There's something that the mind's actually, we put it on a pinnacle, but spirit or like that cosmic energy or intelligence is what actually is why the mind or even the heart or whatever, everything in our body generates from. So once we can taste that and integrate with that, there's a different intelligence that we can attune to. So that is part of the quest, and that's going to take time of letting go of our comforts, and that would be the main thing. It's like, cool, are people willing to gradually let go of some of their comforts to discover who they are outside of the whatever their environment is, you know, to try to get out of that and really discover who they are on the inside.
Yeah, so it's all everybody can relate, I think, to this idea that we all have this kind of calling inside of us, and we all have these moments of not feeling fulfilled, and what is my highest purpose? What am I here for? All of this, and what I'm hearing from you is that it actually takes some courage to throw yourself into the abyss of the unknown to pursue that, right? And there isn't probably any other way to really do that, because I think it's also symbolic in the idea of trusting the process so much that you're willing to put yourself in a situation where you don't know how it's going to unfold, right? It's like, I'm going to give up my job, or I'm going to close my business, or whatever it is. There's a massive amount of courage in that, because so many barriers we have to overcome in closing a door which is built on an old paradigm of what we think success is, right? And even, I know people have had really successful businesses, they're millionaires, and they're just like, I'm just going to shut this down, and then they go and, live on the top of a mountain or whatever. It takes a massive amount of courage and trust. So just give us your insights to that, because how do people do that? Because it's a big jump.
It's huge. And, I think the main thing is you'll get to a threshold, or you'll get to an event horizon. Even if you slowly chip away, eventually you'll get to the void, the event horizon, and it's going to take you anywhere, it's like, you don't have to believe me, because you'll know that it's true. You know what I mean? There'll be a deeper truth so eventually there's this surrender or letting go journey. And the more that someone who's got that calling that doesn't follow it, it's going to nag the shit out of them, and that might deteriorate their health, deteriorate their relationships, bring more fear, bring more anxiety. The inevitable is going to happen. So when does the person want to surrender to it? When do they want to build the courage, And often the longer you leave it, the harder the boot is going to be.
Yeah, is it on their terms, or have they left it
Yeah. And it's all going to be perfect however it unfolds. But once we know that, it's like, wow, okay, I'm getting signs and symbols here. And sometimes signs and symbols in the spiritual community can be clouded by emotional bias, like it's really feeding their personal self rather than their destiny calling. It's filtered through their lens of reality, and the signs are just confirming what their personal self wants, rather than destiny destiny has this ecstatic aliveness to it that's fucking scary, and it's also amazing. And in honesty, there's no other way but to leap and to jump and to go for it. Like any other strategy is just building another coping mechanism that's going to slow down the journey, and that's fine. If you want to creep along, take some steps, get closer, have a look, but eventually that deeper truth is going to get you, whether it's this lifetime or next lifetime. And when I say get you, it's like there's a feeling that is so alive, that's so like, oh my God, I know kind of why I'm here. I'm remembering why I've come and why my soul is choosing to incarnate, and I'm getting a glimpse of it. And it's felt like it's been a slow process to me, where the last few years have really deepened into and so there. But if I didn't throw myself in the journey, then I would never discover it. Now, the best thing is you can use like, if you jump into a journey that isn't yours, you'll just get deep feedback back. You'll get deep wisdom back, so there's nothing really to lose, in the sense of, cool, I want to go do this, I'm going to. And of course, there's plenty of smart ways to go, right, well, what if it doesn't work out, then what would I do?
Well, there's the alchemist story, which is, you got to go on the, you feel unfulfilled, you go on the journey, go travel around the world, only to come back to where you started from, but with new wisdom and insights, to realize that, oh, okay, it was the journey of gathering the wisdom that was important.
Yeah, totally. So That's another interesting piece too. So many people have bought into a linear timeline, and linear is not even time is not linear, because if you look at the way the planets move and everything orbits, it's more spherical, it's circular anyway. So, but we've got these timelines that are linear, and we have been indoctrinated to believe in that so much that that affects our connection with the universe. Because, for example, the indigenous culture versus like the Western culture. Like I've got a great friend down the road. He is from 4 tribes, so his grandparents are from 4 different indigenous tribes here from the Jabberkai land. And so when he wants to do a land welcoming or wants to come in, I'm like, hey, I've got my soul tribe coming. I have to let them know that he may not turn up, because the higher truth is spirit. So spirit calls you in this moment that you've got to go somewhere. That's it. So when it's like, cool, where is he? He's like, the culture is he's where he needs to be. That's the higher truth, So in the West, we're like, our personality is so fixed on a set of, and where did these things come from? Have we ever like, where does this, where does it all come from? So once we start questioning this, we can free ourselves up from some of the rules and the dogma. And time means something different to many other people.
And exactly, and that attachment and that desperation to trying to get something, like I love some of the indigenous practices, like, I mean, all they're thinking about is the future generations, like their practices are to look after the future generations. Where where we come from, it's like, what have I got to do this week to make $1 million?
Oh yeah. No, for me, like money will be generated via like my soul and like a good ecosystem, or not, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but it took you something to learn that, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what's been, I guess, I'm going to assume, because I know you quite well, you've had your own inner battles and struggles. Certainly inner conflicts and conversations around how to integrate all those worlds, how to drop that desperation, that ego-driven desperation to want to be somebody, and doing entrepreneurship to make money and to be seen and trying to get something. What's been your journey in that, and how have you now come to a point where you've been able to weave a fabric of these worlds?
I think one acceptance that for everyone out there, it's either you're going to make money via your soul calling or you're not. And I'll get back to directly in my particular journey. So accept that. You'll either make money from your soul calling or you won't. Hard pill to swallow for the personality that wants to be something, that wants to, get ahead. Then ironically, by you following the soul, the personality surrenders to the deeper truth of the soul and the spirit. And its gifts start to emerge, and the soul starts to connect you with what you need to, and you will generate what is required via the core purpose of your soul purpose. But until you're willing to, for 6 months or a year, whatever time it is, to go, cool, I'm either going to make money from this, from my soul, or I'm not. Now, this brings the question, like, what is soul and what is personality? So a quick way to describe that is personality is built on the lower triangle, which is fear, survival, and up the top is trade and exchange. So we came in that survival culture where we're trying to just survive. We've got healthy fears that keep us alive in the tribal culture. Then we worked out that if we do trade and exchange, that where there's a level of safety and security we've got. And that's why someone can have $1 billion or someone could have like $1,000. It doesn't really, it's subjective to the person, because it's based on their fear and survival and how that triangle is integrated. Yeah, so the upper part of the triangle is connecting to the essence of our soul, and why has our soul come here, and doing whatever we can to find that and commune with it and to communicate with the soul. Then it's taking a will to stand for that purpose. That's the first part of the upper triangle. The second piece is to bring love and wisdom to why our soul has come here. Otherwise, it's going to be egoic. It's going to be a form of the personality. And now I've got a new mission and it's a new mask. Deep love and wisdom has to come to our calling, which is, this is the masculine and the feminine coming together. That gives birth to the third ray, which is creative intelligence, which is a download of ideas, which is basically ideas for humanity. Because the soul is group conscious, and it's connected to other souls, and it has a backup of different lives, and it's wanting to incarnate. So if that is the upper part of the personality versus the lower.
And that would be without attachment to any agenda or any outcome, right? Because, you know, I've had interactions with people and they're like, you know, my mission in life is to change the world. I'm like, okay, well, I can just hear in the way that they're speaking that it's you're saying that because you want to be seen to be changing the world, right? That's not really coming from a authentic kind of pure place. And whilst the sentiment might be lovely, you know, the thing that I like to say is it's not my job to change the world. It's my job to create the next ripple, because I like that notion, because it's very easy for the ego to creep in when it's about me changing the world. Whereas if it's about me creating a ripple, well, A, it humbles me, but B, it kind of grounds me into it being about helping other people as opposed to doing this grand thing, I'm going to change the fucking world, right? So how do people keep themselves grounded in that?
Yeah, you know, I've battled with this to be honest, you know, and I have a lot of compassion because, like, you know, I was definitely that dude, and deep underneath, it's because you're wanting to be seen, and some of it is the soul wanting to just express through as well. So there's a part of having compassion for where people's journey is at, because sometimes they just have to live that to kind of experience it and go through it. And maybe that's the lesson that their soul needs to gather. But I think on a bigger scale, we are moving into soul. So we are becoming more, you know, the youth are becoming more hopefully inspired by those souls that have kind of incarnated and have got some wisdom to share for the next generation. And so what I would say to someone who's in that wanting to be seen and witnessed is, you know, find a space for that, to be seen and witnessed as soon as possible, to realize that it's a deeper layer than that. And that process will also probably deliver some great learning lessons that will be individual to that soul. You know, another thing that's coming through is you just go out there and get your heart broken faster and sooner. That superficial piece of the heart that feels like it need, you know, and to realize that, oh, wait up, it's something deeper, and to be humbled by that love, and to realize that small is often a lot more powerful than big, you know, and a lot more enjoyable. You know, that it's expressed in the saying, the small fish are sweet, you know, like, can we just be humble? And in Daoism, they say, you know, soft will overcome hard. And the soul is a desiring of that gentleness to come through, where the personality, you know, the key thing I would say, Monty, to people is like, are you chasing something outside? Because I think it's Carl Jung that says, if you look within, you awaken. Forget the other piece of it, but that's the fundamental part. It's like, if your vision is coming from within, it doesn't matter how you do today or whatever. It doesn't, you know, it's you're enjoying the journey, you're enjoying the process. If it's something outside of myself, I'm going to forever chase that carrot. That also comes back to the reason we chase the carrot is when civilization started to form tribes and become a civilization, the leaders had this question, like, how are we going to live in a civilized way? One of the ways was through the carrot and the stick. So you do something good, I'm going to reward you with a carrot. So then I learn, you do something bad, I'm going to hit you with a stick. So that trains the cognitive mind to follow a set of man-made rules and laws. But if you journey the spiritual path, which is the second way, which the Taoists and other cultures, you know, came to, a deeper, I want to say a morality, but most people's morality now is indoctrinated by a certain belief and emotion. It's not that natural awakening that governs, you know, goodness or kindness or right action or right virtue. That comes through, you know, qigong or reading certain texts or getting into the land and kind of civilizing our mind and connecting to our land and our country and the body, that forms a different law that is different to the cognitive function of the mind. And so really humanity has to learn to integrate these two. And I feel for the entrepreneur, that's the path. Like or at least that's a part of the journey moving forward. I feel like those who are going to receive funds are going to be those who are more integrated to soul and integrated to their spirit and their humanity. Not like, look at me, I've got this or I've got that. Like, nice things are okay, but you'll know whether it's coming from a nice place or not.
Yeah, and I know what's true for me, and probably like you, I've evolved over the years to the point where, to me, the more that I sharpen the axe on this stuff, and embed myself into spiritual practice and even the small things, like, just being present and my practices of gratitude and all these kind of things, the more that those financial desires kind of dissipate. I mean, they're kind of, are there things I'd like to have? Sure, I'd like to buy a Tesla. I don't think it's very practical in Bali, but there's stuff that I would like to have. But the things that I had on my vision board when I was 18, like big mansions and a big boat and a jet, it's like, I don't give a fuck about that anymore. It's that's just kind of dissolved. I live a really nice, beautiful life in Bali, and I'm very well, looked after. But I think that's because I have dissolved a lot of that. It's like the more that I can dissolve that, the more that I'm rewarded, and it seems very counterintuitive. The more I surrender, the more that I get.
Yeah.
So, is this the work that you do with entrepreneurs? I mean, I know you're teaching people about very specific practices around qigong and breathing and this kind of thing, and all this conversation can link back to, if I was going to, I could, come to you on each of these points and say, how do people do that? How do people integrate? And it all comes back to probably the same place, which is, embracing these practices of breathing and qigong and tapping into that internal life force and introspection, so that they can have that greater awareness and then tune in to, their higher self, so to speak. Is this the work that you do with entrepreneurs? Kind of go into a little bit more depth of what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, sure. So I've got what's called the embodied I-Ching, which is my own modality, which leads into teacher training. And really what this is how to bring a new civilization forward, and how do people reestablish their connection to their body and their spirit and their soul. When it comes to entrepreneurs, they're bright people. They're fundamentally bright people. It's just that we all have deep insecurities, and an entrepreneur is a go-getter. They're very fast off the block. They're very, so basically the way I look at it, one of the key reasons of why I've come here as a soul, it's not the main one, because really I just look at humanity as all one, we're all in this together. The entrepreneurs, however, they're leading a lot of the culture and a lot of the innovation, a lot of the change. So if they reestablish their connection to their body and their soul and work through some of their core issues, their footprint and their impact in the world is a lot more fulfilling for their own soul and for their own body. And the teacher training is really just a journey that anyone could take.
Yeah. So, and probably, sorry to interrupt there, but collectively in that, the more people that can tap into that collectively, we can move the needle on really where the world needs to go, where humanity needs to go, and this connection that, is a conversation with every one of my guests in some manner or form, which is connecting back to spirit and nature. Yeah. So you've got your own methodology based on the original I-Ching. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the difference between the I-Ching and the embodied I-Ching is, the I-Ching is the book of changes. So it's how we work with change, and the I-Ching is the fundamental Taoist theory. There's different sources to its origin. It's the understanding of how nature unfolds. Everything comes from nothing. Then there's yin, then there's yang. This is a basic example. Then there's the 4 seasons, 5 elements, 8 directions, 64 things, 10,000 things, which means, all the things. And that's just one sort of example. The embodied I-Ching, we work through the chakras, so 8 including the soul. And each of the chakras has a fundamental power that we wrestle with in life and that we have a natural skill in. So it's about the integration of healthy power. And it has the 8 elements that we work through the chakras, and then it has transmissions for each of the elements. So basically there's 56 layers that we work with that reveal parts of our consciousness through our body. So most entrepreneurs and most people, their consciousness is projected outside. They've got to return that. So the I-Ching helps them integrate that through their body and their being. And so it's a very far more embodied experience. And it actually, you become more of a ninja. You can actually articulate deeper questions based on the individual rather than, because the ego is going to pretty much perform the same tricks until it has a significant transformation. So that means every question you bring to the I-Ching will kind of deliver you. So we encourage people to go deeper and look through their body, which can sometimes have the consciousness is stagnant, stale, or blocked in that particular area. So there's also a physical component of movement that activates each of the chakras through the 8 elements. So if someone's having issues with finances, could be related to the base chakra, or digestive issues could be related to the solar plexus, or chemical imbalances could be because of the pineal gland. So each of those 8 movements help their body or their country come back to a normal functioning, because a lot of their actions are coming from chemical imbalance or a need to whatever. So it's really about, I'm not so much interested about their performance anymore, but if their health and their well-being and their alignment is in sync, they nature kind of looks after them, they unfold in a better way.
The performance is there, it's just no longer needed to be articulated as performance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And and a lot of that superficial drive, which is just honestly burning the candles at both ends, disappears. And then they're like, holy crap, I've got more time for my daughter or my partner or my wife, or I'm going down to the beach and I don't have that nagging. Like this morning, I was just in the rainforest and just enjoying the flow and just like, that's a daily experience for me. Not like where in the past I would be so full of anxiety or doubt or worry. I've got to launch something. I've got to write a post. I've got, this person's doing this, that person's doing that. I've got to do that. And we're putting our power outside of ourselves, and no lessons are found there. Like no lessons. The only lesson that would be found there is that I'm putting my power outside of myself, which is useless, which is, Yeah,
it's been very, very, very similar for me. I mean, I had my first business when I was 8 years old, and that was born out of pure desperation. Like this, I still remember I still can feel the feeling of not having enough, like looking around going, I grew up on a boat, and, in reflection now as an adult, I look back and go, okay, we had it better than 95% of the planet. But when I was 8 years old, I'm looking around and like, I had to row a dinghy, a boat to get to school. And, we didn't have a TV, and, I had to wash out of a bucket, and, all these things. And what I made it mean is, I got to fucking hustle and I got to create something for myself. But it was my pattern just for the longest time. And because it started at such a young age, that was tough to unravel, and there's still a lot of remnants there that I have the hyper awareness now to catch it very quickly, right? Yeah. But, this process of sharpening the axe, that I like to call it, is the very thing that makes me be able to make things move around me instead of me being the one to move all the time, because we get so addicted to this hustle and the moving. And like you said, you take time for yourself and then you feel anxiety. And when you can get to a point where, like for me, I know that the way I'm going to achieve more, create more, get more is by being still and going and sitting in the ice bath, right? That's the work now. Like that's the work. Right?
Totally.
Yeah. So it's a really cool place to get to. And so it's very important work that you're doing. And one of the things I want to kind of touch on there is when people can probably go through, what you're teaching people, and we will come back to, you've got a teacher program or whatever, but by people embracing that, they're going to tap into what the opportunities are, right? Because on the surface level, we can look around in the world and go, okay, I'm going to do this affiliate marketing thing. It's going to make me this. And it's like, no, the greater opportunities is to look into the future and know where humanity is headed and where humanity is being called, right?
Yeah.
And the way to tap into that is to tap into this for yourself, which I think is beautiful work that you're doing, because you're allowing people to tap into that, which then has them see opportunities that other people aren't going to see, right?
Yeah.
Which is where I'm going to assume a lot of their success comes from. Because from that stillness that we're talking about, and the not that desperation, that anxious energy, they're more attuned to an authentic energy, which actually has them feel the success rather than feel the anxiety. But they no longer need the success, right? The journey is the success. But I think it's really important work, because it's showing people, it's giving people a platform or an access to see opportunities that maybe they would not have otherwise seen. And I think the more we have these kind of conversations, the more you teach people, the more I can share this message with a greater audience, is the more that collectively we can move the needle. And I think this is the work that we have to do.
Yeah, beautiful. There's one message that's coming through, a couple of things, if you don't mind. My grandmother used to say to me, Ryan, patience is a virtue, possess it if you can, often found in women and seldom found in man. And I think the soul has a feminine and masculine aspect to it. And the immature masculine in all of us, female bodies or male bodies, it's, don't do the gender game, it's silly. The immature masculine in all of us isn't patient and just wants to make the money, wants to prove they're enough. And so my message is like, from my grandmother, patience is a virtue, possess it if you can, often found in women, seldom found in man. Develop the patience to understand that if you're going to be rich and successful, you will be anyway. But are you man and or woman enough to develop that richness within your soul, and then let your soul reveal why you're here? Because if you're intelligent enough to make it, you'll make it, but you're only going to realize that what you've created is not in line with your soul. Can you surrender enough to connect to the soul and then generate your possibilities from within rather than chasing something outside? So that's what I would say to some of the entrepreneurs that know that they've got the chance to kind of make it. Can they really go within and take some time to, and time is the most valuable commodity we got, and it's how we spend it with getting to know who we actually are and finding that stillness. For the young entrepreneurs that are still going for it, that are just out there and they might be at the very beginning, it's kind of just have the courage to well, how would you say it, Monty? It's like, how could I go back to I don't know if I would change much of my own journey, although I definitely live it different from this version. But those lessons led up to this. So for the younger ones, it's kind of like, find good mentors, find good places that can accelerate your journey, be a part of good crews and tribes, eat well, look and demand better outcomes, because youth have so much more influence over the future generations than sometimes like the elderly, because it seems that they're in that area where we're fascinated by beautiful children with their creativity and their connection and their innocence. So like, demand more possibilities, because the entrepreneur will drive change, but actually who makes change is the consumers. So by them saying, we want schools that are more environment friendly. We want food that's more organic and close to our sources. We want to look after our community. It's not that I'm against any other country. It makes sense to look after our community first and drive these more important tips home. That that's changing the world enough, And from that, look at the opportunities of how you can serve in line with principles because life respects life. The more you align yourself with it, the more that life will generate more of that life. It's just how it works. So that's kind of what I would say, if there's any value in that.
100%. That's beautiful. So, look, I've got one final question for you, but before we do that, where can people find you? How can people, just give a brief snapshot of this teacher training that you're doing. Where can people reach you? Is it Instagram? How can people follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. So Rhyn, Rhyn, and then Nasser, Nasser. Also Chi Ascension Tribe, so chiascensiontribe.com, and also the Facebook group. So we offer free Qigong and everything there if people want to, develop breathing practices and moving.
I'll get the links and we'll put the links for everybody to just click the button.
Yeah. And I really believe that people, it's like an offering of a heart. If people resonate with it, great, they can go further. If not, great. It's good for me and them. We're looking for alignment. Then there's no need. I don't need to save the world. I just have some beautiful things that I've discovered from many beautiful traditions and teachers that I've packaged together as an Aquarian age soul for this next 2,000-year cycle that we're in. And I feel they're of great value to accelerate people's evolution by realizing that who they actually are as a soul and what they have to offer, which is something found within, not actually found without.
Yeah. No, I think it's really, really beautiful. Because it's not just, what can I get right now for me, but it's more like how can I develop myself in such a way that it is going to create those ripples. So yeah, it's really nice. So thank you so much, Ryan. I just want to acknowledge you for for your contribution, man, for your contribution to what you're doing and the way that you show up. I've known you for a long time, and I think you and I have both watched each other change, hopefully for the better. But you have a lot of grace in the way that you are, in the way that you show up now. And you're teaching very, very important stuff. So I acknowledge you and I honor you for the work that you're doing. I'll make sure everybody gets to find you. So one last question. If you had the ability, the superpower to connect with every soul that is living on the planet right now and share one message, what would that message be?
It's remember who you are and why you've come. Very simple. Remember who you are and why you come, and remember why your soul has chose to incarnate. What's its sacred incarnative function, and to realize that to what is the meaning of spirituality. We have to look at the opposite. Spirituality is someone who relates to the Tao or the quantum or the inner worlds or the etheric. But to really understand spirituality, you have to look at the opposing pole, which is the physical. And that is this grounded here now life. And in order to integrate those two is what really spirituality is. And sometimes people go to spirituality to escape, and we should go there to remember who we are, which is not always a pleasant journey.
Yeah, that's very well put. Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rhyn Nasser. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you subscribe, make sure you download, and make sure you go check out this guy, Rhyn Nasser. He's got some cool shit to share. Get involved, people.